Well, greetings, everyone. This is the Saving Paradise One Species at a Time session. My name is Mark O'Brien. I'm at BirdLife International, and I'm also the key biodiversity area regional focal point. Stuart yesterday did a bit on the various state of conservations in Oceania. One relevant one to us, looking at the red list and how that reflected what was going on, showed that the status for that was fair, but the trend was deteriorating. So what I want this session to be, basically, is, if you like, it's the 3 stars and a wish. These are the stars. We are the stars, and at the end of the session, I want us to come up with a wish for how we can convert that deteriorating trend into something which at least is stable, if not improving. So without further ado, I'll get stuck in with the very first presentation, which is from Emily in BGCI in the UK, and it's a movie. So here we go.
Hi everyone from England. I'm Emily Beach and I'm an organization called Botanic Conservation International. I'm going to talk today about tree conservation in the Pacific, particular focus on BGCI's work in conservation prioritization for trees and practical tree conservation. So, before we can prioritize conservation action for trees, we need to know which species are in conservation action. On the work is BGCI and IUCN tree assessment group decided to embark on the tree assessment.
Sorry, I can't see anything. Can you share your screen?
Tree species.
Sorry?
Mark, you need to share your screen, please. We can only hear the audio.
Oh, right. Okay.
We can take it from the beginning again, though. Just rewind and share screen and play. Thank you.
So I'm now going into the same panic that the previous folk did. Share the screen, Emily Beach. And is that working?
I can see the slides. You just need to begin the presentation.
I can't see the slides, so that's my concern.
I think it's a PDF. Actually, it's not the slideshow.
Share the screen. How about that?
Not yet, no.
Does that work?
Not yet, no. You haven't shared the screen. You're playing it on your computer, but it's only playing to you, so we can only hear the audio.
Ah, dear. So,
Mark,
okay,
we can go to another presentation if you want, and then come back to this one, if that makes sense.
Sharing the screen. PDF. That's the.
Not the PDF. We need the video.
No, I'm not doing this at all right. Sorry, so I'm confused now because it worked earlier on, I thought. But,
Mark, would you like one of us to go ahead with our presentation?
Justin, could you take a lead and we'll do the back stuff first?
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So can you see me down here and hear me okay?
You're good. Go for it.
So hello, everybody. My name is Justin Welbergen. I'm an associate professor at the Hawkesbury Institute for the Environment at Western Sydney University, but it is in my capacity of president of the Australasian Bat Society that I'm speaking to you today. So what is the Australasian Bat Society about? The ABS is the peak body promoting bat conservation in the Australasian region. And our society has over 500 members, including scientists, natural resource managers, students, educators, wildlife rehabilitators, and members of the general public. Our primary aim is to promote the conservation of bats and their habitats through the advancement of quality science and the extensive experience of our members. In our society's constitution, Australasia is explicitly defined as the area highlighted in green. This area envelops about 89% of the bat biodiversity of Oceania. Oceania is home to some weird and wonderful bats indeed. It contains 188 species, and bats are the only native mammals in 13 of the 26 countries and territories that comprise Oceania. Bats have cultural and historical significance throughout the region as totems, food, and even as currency in some places. However, Oceania bats are disproportionately affected by extinction, as many are island endemics with small restricted ranges. The region is in fact a troubled bat diversity hotspot indeed. It contains 38 of the 83 endangered and critically endangered bat species globally, 7 of the world's 8 extinct bat species, and 17 species are currently data deficient. So across the region, bats have been used as trigger species in KBA assessments, yet there are very few conservation actions that specifically address bats, and many assessments that include bats are now based on outdated data. While there are exemplary bat conservation initiatives with ABS involvement, including in Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and New Caledonia, most ABS members are currently from Australia, creating a mismatch between the membership and the regional representation of bat species. So to address this, the ABS has been exploring new models to expand its membership and to help establish more locally led, sustainable bat conservation initiatives beyond Australia. So what can the ABS do to help promote bat conservation in the broader region? The ABS has strengths, particularly in information sharing, capacity building, and funding support. The ABS already promotes the sharing of conservation relevant information through its conferences, bat nights, websites, social media, and message board. And these mechanisms can readily be expanded or co-opted to help bat conservation in the broader region. The ABS membership also contains an enormous amount of relevant expertise that could be directed to help local organizations build capacity in achieving bat conservation goals. Finally, the ABS provides support in the form of project grants to help kickstart much needed local research activities or to build local community involvement. Also to leverage grants to enable larger bat conservation initiatives. So note that building community involvement entails much more, of course, than obtaining funds or research or conservation projects. It also has very real impediments, including cultural factors, poverty, education, and technological and communication constraints. So to this end, we have been working hard to bring together a range of local and global partners for a Pacific Bat Conservation Network, PACBAT for short. So the aim of PACBAT is to identify priorities, impediments, and solutions for effective community-led bat conservation in Oceania. This network incorporates strengths and organizational capacity of the ABS, fosters greater collaboration, and allows for a slow and deliberate growth to bring together more people from the region. It also integrates Oceania into the growing tapestry of bat diversity networks to help leverage the collective knowledge and expertise for improved local conservation outcomes. PACBAT's first concrete action is to organize a now well overdue follow-up to BCI's 1990 Pacific Island Flying Fox conference. And this Pacific Bat Forum is set to be held online mid-next year. So watch this space on Facebook, especially. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. That's wonderful. Great start. Martika, would you like to run through your slot?
Hello, I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about our work with the Banks Flying Fox. We've got 12 species of bat that are known to occur across the islands of Vanuatu, two of which are endemic, the Vanuatu flying fox and the Banks flying fox, and two are endemic to Fiji and Vanuatu, the Fijian blossom bat and Fijian rustic bat. Our BAT project mainly focuses on the Banks flying fox, Carabus bandages, and our research was mainly based at the Banks Island. Banks Island consists of 6 smaller group of islands that are located at the north of Vanuatu. This species is classified as endangered under the IUCN Red List, and it is endemic only to the Banks Island. According to scientific literature, the Banks flying fox was only known to occur in 3 islands in the Banks, Mota, Vanuatu, and Motala. Specimens have been collected in the 1960s from those 3 islands, but it was only captured in Mota in the 1990s. PES has also conducted an expedition back in 2018, and we recorded the species only in Mota, not in Vanuatu. However, our surveys were brief and limited to single surveys in Vanuatu and therefore our survey effort may not have been sufficient to detect all species. There is little knowledge or little is known about ecology and types of species. We don't know much about the breeding seasons, breeding sites, roosting sites. There's not much information about that. And according to our discussion, like we have had discussion with communities and environmental leaders in the Banks Island, and from a discussion, it suggested that there's discrepancy between scientific literature and knowledge provided by the community. They say they see the Banks flying fox in other islands in the Banks. But the situation is also clouded a little because the Vanuatu flying fox, which is also threatened, it looks very similar to the Banks flying fox, and this could cause confusion, and it is hard to differentiate the species. From the scientific point of view, the farmland is the attribute that is most useful for differentiating the species. Again, the species is known to occur only in the Banks Island. Banks Island are isolated and are very small. So stochastic events such as tropical cyclones can wipe the entire population. Communities rely heavily on agriculture and agriculture for food and for money, for income. And the habitats, the bad habitats related to Kokava and Koka. Tropical cyclone, Vanuatu is prone to tropical cyclones, and after tropical cyclones, the species bats are hunted for food. This could cause threat to the population. We have collected some results so far. In 2018, we have recorded 4 Banks flying fox in Mota. Other species recorded includes the Fijian blossom bat and the Pacific flying fox, but we did not detect any of the Vanuatu flying fox in the port of our survey sites. From our questionnaire survey, 100% every people say they see the flying foxes, but only 66% of respondents they say they see the Banks flying fox. 15% of them they say they see the Vanuatu flying fox. However, only 5% of people say they see both the Vanuatu flying fox and the Banks flying fox. It's quite interesting because it is quite hard to differentiate the 2 species, the Vanuatu flying fox and Banks flying fox. Therefore, we are going to do more research surveys to catch the bats and establish the distribution. Also help the communities to protect the species and increase the chance of survival. Our raising activities has definitely created a sense of pride in the communities. They've already taken actions to protect the endangered species and chiefs, leaders, stop people from hunting flying foxes and those birds. and also it has created pride. So it has improved the knowledge on the ecosystem services provided by BARTS and the view towards BARTS. Our next steps, we're going to help establish a partner network in the communities that the Banks Folks and the Vanuatu Folks present, and provide them with notebooks, binoculars, so that they can be able to collect basic information about the endemic species. And also scientifically, we continue to do scientific studies to establish the ecology and habitat use behavior and range of these endemic species. We would like to acknowledge our donor for providing the fund in order to carry out the project activities. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. That's excellent, Martika, and I recognise the bats behind you. Straight into you, Sateri, if you can take it from here.
Thank you, Mark. I'm already starting from the end. All right, Bulubinaka, my name is Tertikava. I'm currently a PhD student with the University of Adelaide. But prior to this, I worked for Nature Fiji Margativiti, Fiji's only local conservation, membership-based conservation organization. And I'll be talking about conservation of Fijian bat species. Before I jump into achievements and lessons learned, just a brief on the bats in Fiji. They're important because of they act as seed dispersers and they aid in pollination and also insect control. We have 6 species of bats in Fiji. 5 out of 6 are listed in the IUCN Red List of threatened species. Out of the 6, 3 are tree-dwelling species, and these are the flying foxes, including our very own Fijian flying fox that is known only from Taveuni and is critically endangered. And 3 other species are cave-dwelling, one of which is the Fijian blossom bat that is nectivorous, and 2 insectivorous bats that use echolocation to find their prey. First of all, for most of these bats, there are so many unknowns, especially when considering ecological knowledge of these bat species. My focus of the talk today is going to be on the Fijian free-tailed bat species. And so much is unknown about this species, from its diet, habitat, population status, seasonality. There's no management plan, and it's known from Fiji and Vanuatu, but the Fijian population, there is only one known cave. And when we started doing this work, there was a logging road that ran just above the cave, and which was a major threat because with heavier loads and the more times this road is used, there was a big threat to the species, because people thought that, we thought that if the cave collapses, we will lose the species and, might even become extinct. So it was very urgent for us to do something about it. So I'll touch a bit on the lessons learned and talk about it in detail later, but what we saw was there was a lot to do in such little time. Urgent action was needed. So even though we needed to save one species, we needed to really look at the bigger picture, because we didn't know about foraging areas, about its habitat and everything. Our approach was we targeted a lot of almost like an ecosystem level approach, where we targeted so many things from vegetation and cave mapping and all the work all at one time, so we can move a lot of the milestones ahead in such a little short time. And as we go through the milestones and achievements, you'll see what I mean. So yes, without even knowing it, we sort of took an ecosystem level approach, and as such, and because of the power of collaboration, we were able to, there was so much progress in such little time over the last 4 years. So just briefly, the Fijian free-tailed bat is a very small insectivorous bat, weighs up to 20 grams, cave dwelling, and is insectivorous. Sorry, I seem to keep saying insectivorous. So the one cave I mentioned is found on 2 blocks of land, freehold land, on one island on Taviuni, on Vanuatu. This is in Nakanavangi. And first, because we needed to sort of stop that activity and close off the road above the cave, we needed to secure the 2 blocks that the cave sits under. So while working with the Bat Conservation International, as well as National Trust of Fiji, we actually put together the Fiji Bat Conservation Initiative, and we brought together all experts from all our partners, really, USP, BirdLife International, IUCN, and we kind of put together a committee that sort of sits and advises on what the best next steps are to help us, to help guide our conservation action on the ground. So the first step was to really find out who owns these 2 pieces of land and to secure it so we could secure the home of this endangered species. As of last year, and thanks to National Trust of Fiji and through the Rainforest Trust Fund, we have been able to purchase both pieces of land, and this is currently being managed by National Trust of Fiji, who is legally mandated to look after heritage sites like this. And yeah, I'll just keep going because I talk a lot and I can't keep things within the 5 minutes. So the next step, we needed to know about where it was flying to forage. So we worked with our local partners. We worked with people from the Ministry of Forestry, National Trust of Fiji, the Manuatu Provincial Office, the villages themselves, and we trained them on how to do telemetry. We needed to understand where they were going to eat and what they were eating. What we saw from this preliminary telemetry work was they were flying to forested areas, which is sort of unusual, as species from this genus are known to feed on agricultural pests. So this was interesting. Of course, this was a one-off in January of 2017, still so much more to learn. Was it just because maybe there was more food in forested areas during that time? Does it change it during the season, different times in the season when maybe agricultural, when rice is flowering or whatever? So many unknowns. But as a first step, we saw that they seem to prefer forested areas. As part of the partnership and the work, we were able to work with volunteers who are experts in mapping, and we were able to map the cave at Nakanavangi. Through the Rainforest Trust Fund that was secured in 2017, we were also able to do the first biodiversity rapid assessment, where we looked at everything that was currently in the vicinity and the importance, and all of this is really to help inform the management plan of the area. And we currently working with Dave Waldine and the national. There's a National Geographic grant that is currently that we currently have that we are using to develop a national bat strategy. Through our collaboration with BGCI, as I said, we sort of took an ecosystem level approach. We were targeting not just our cave stuff, but we were also trying to understand the habitat around the cave and the needs. When we did the first vegetation study, we saw that the vegetation around the cave was dry forest, and dry forest is one of the most threatened ecosystems in Fiji, with only about 2% of dry forests left in Fiji. So we worked with our with our international partner, BGCI, and we worked with, again, the Ministry of Forestry, Ministry of Agriculture, SPC, Yaumbula management teams and the locals to help put together a rehabilitation plan to understand the threats currently, threats on the site, and most of the areas have been burnt, and a lot of areas needed rehabilitation. And one of the work that came out of it was a preliminary rehabilitation plan. Of course, in collaboration with our other partners, like I mentioned earlier, with Harrison Institute, we are currently working to develop a national bat strategy, not just for Cheraphon bragulae or the Fijian free-tailed bat, but for all 6 species that we have in Fiji. We worked with Kyle Armstrong and had acoustic training for the NFMV team, which is the Nature Fiji team, as well as National Trust, acoustic data collection and cave visits. Everywhere we went, we took bat detectors to try to collect as much acoustic data as possible. And we also reached out to our partners, our local partners, to see if they could put the bat detectors out in other areas that we weren't accessing. And this was an opportunistic approach. I wasn't sort of the best approach, because they just, if they were on a boat or at a village site, they just put it wherever, and it wasn't really prioritized. So we weren't really getting good quality data. So we have also, over the past year or so, have been working on compiling a cave inventory from literature, as well as through reaching out to our local network, working with the provincial offices to get whatever data we can on available of known caves in the area. And we are working on, I guess the next step is to try to see if these caves actually have bats, and working on updating that cave inventory for Fiji. A lot of awareness has been happening as part of this project over the last 4 or 5 years. And really, any chance we get to train locals and to talk about the initiative, we do that. There has been a lot of capacity building, not just for the Nature Fiji team, but for National Trust and the locals, on how to do netting, handling bats, deploying bat acoustics, bat detectors, understanding the importance of this work, and understanding all different equipment that is needed to do such work. And as a result of all of this work, and also because of the networking, and as the project officer, I saw that there were so many, still after all the work and all the achievements, there's still so many unknowns, especially for the ecological knowledge for the Fijian free-tailed bat. So I'm now studying at the University of Adelaide, doing a PhD to try to answer some of these big questions, and looking at genetics, diet, and understanding foraging habitats and habitats that are important for the survival of the Fijian free-tailed bat. Through our partnership with Christopher Newport University, we had students who took up studies to help answer questions relating to population status. And through this work, we've been able to update the population status, what we know, the estimate of the number of bats at the cave up in Makanavangi. And that was a work that Ben helped us with, and Cici, another student from Christopher Newport, helped in putting together mapping the vegetation types currently. So vegetation types at Nakanavangi around the cave. Next steps, now that we've secured the home of these beautiful bats, now what? So still as part of the Rainforest Trust Fund that we currently have running and ends in 2022, we need to ensure that the protected area is secure, and this involves training of the guards, doing routine patrols, appointment of rangers, regular reporting to government, and to maintain their interest and support. And this, for this bit, National Trust of Fiji is really sort of the lead, since they have the experience. Nature Fiji sort of supports the technical aspects of that. There's also the implementation of the conservation and management plan. So as part of this, we've done the first round of biodiversity assessments. It says a restoration of the abandoned logging road. Now, currently, from my knowledge, we don't, the logging road isn't being used anymore, and working with the locals to help manage that area, control of invasive species, forest restoration, and to manage visitation. I believe National Trust of Fiji has strict rules around visitation of the cave and permits.
Okay, Terry, that's great. Can we move on, mate? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Terry. Brilliant stuff. Right, I'm going to have another go at sharing my screen. We'll see what happens. Let me know rapidly if it doesn't work properly.
Go for it.
The other person is sharing. Can't share screen while the other participant is sharing. Are you still on, Terry?
Okay, wait. Got it. There you go.
No, I'm done yet. Here we go. Share screen. There we go. And then it's. No, right. I'm sorry about this, chaps. I'm really struggling to work out how to get Emily's talk to go. Is that working?
No, you haven't shared the screen.
Ah, wow, I thought I had shared the screen. Share screen. Yeah, correct.
Correct, great.
Excellent.
Volume.
Mark, there's no audio. Can you turn the volume up, please? You're going to have to unmute yourself.
So it's loud and clear to me. So I'm now going to have to do what?
Press play again and don't mute yourself. Just start again. Mark, I think you're playing it through your speakers, so you can hear it, but the rest of us can't. I'm afraid it's not working. We can't hear the audio.
Okay. Should we?
We can always move to another presentation. You're muted.
There we go. Okay. Anybody listening?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is all going wonderfully badly. Shall I do a presentation myself? Do my own one, yeah? Okay, so.
Please do,
Second.
that would be good, thank you.
Now then, I'm probably not going to be able to get myself on the screen either.
That's working.
You've got that? Can you see that? Okay, so sorry about this, chaps. We'll try and get through this fairly rapidly. The first thing is slideshow. Okay, so Pacific bird conservation, an overview. BirdLife is the IUCN Red List, official IUCN Red List authority. So we oversee the IUCN Red List stuff. We run the program every year, and every 4 years we do a major upgrade. The 4th year is 2020. I am not allowed to talk about it because it's embargoed until the 10th of December. So this data is based on 2016 with a small amount of updates, 2017, 18, and 19. That data indicates, as you might expect, the range of over 1,150 birds across the region, of which 80% are of least concern, and maybe another 14, 15% are in the globally threatened list. That interestingly contrasts what the SOCA report says for all species in the Pacific, in that for them, it's just over 50% are of least concern, but a whopping 23% are data deficient. Data deficient is something we don't particularly go with in the bird group, in the bird work. If you look at how we compare with the rest of the world, we have 11% of the birds in the region, and the region holds 11% of the global birds. And so that's pretty much what we've got for least concern, vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered. We've got about 11 to 15% of the global population in each of those categories. We've got rather more data deficient species in our region, which we're trying to work on at the moment, and a big shout out, which will, I hope, affect our, when we're allowed to talk about this, but Will Goulding, many congratulations, thanks ever so much on all the work you've been doing on that. I won't say any more in case. And then also, of course, you can see that we have a range of species. We've got rather more species that are in the extinct, and this is in the extinct in the last 500 years in the Pacific region. We've got about 20% of all our species are in that category. And if you add in Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, which obviously are sort of Pacific, pretty close to the Pacific, that's over half of all the species that have gone extinct in the last 500 years are in this region, this wider region. And to add to that, we know that, the archaeological data suggests 50%, or over half of the bird species in the region have disappeared since man first arrived. KBAs, as we mentioned before, I'm a KBA coordinator. What we find is that in this region, we've got about 550, 600 KBAs, of which almost a half, 44%, are identified based on their bird populations only at this stage. And then 63% have got birds and other taxa, but there's a whopping 37% where no birds are included. And that data is probably PNG based. So the PNG, Papua New Guinea Key Biodiversity Area is focused on amphibians, and there's a range of stuff. There's really, some really neat work needs to be done to look to see how we can contrast that. So I looked at briefly at IUCN Red List, and I've looked briefly at KBAs and how birds might work there. The way I tend to focus much of my work, particularly on those most threatened species, to look at the recovery journey. And in my head, I see it that we have a research process, solution testing, deployment solution, and sustainable management. The research does not change the population trend. It carries on down. We have to get to management in order to change population trend. And then we have to get to something which isn't involving us, i.e. conservation organizations paying for it. So sustainable management is getting it out the other side. And if you look at the range, the number of species of critically endangered and endangered, you can just roughly see where they fit in that kind of category. Sadly, there's rather more in the research end than there is in the sustainable management end. Although I have to say that those 4 species in sustainable management had previously been either endangered or critically endangered, but their IUCN status has improved. We have lost 12 critically endangered, and to an extent 2 endangered species. We don't really know where to look for them at the moment, so that's another high neglected species then area to focus on. And we don't have any focused monitoring on 12 endangered. But just to give an idea, there's the graph which shows where we are. This Tahiti Monarch in 1989, the research, let's repeat Rarotonga Monarch, kill the rats, that will work, and it didn't. And in 91, for the next 20 years, we tried to work out how to improve the situation for this species. The rats, removing the rats resulted in improved nesting success, but not in return rates. So it's only from 2012 when we realized that controlling miners and bulbuls as well as rats would have an effect as that population started to build up. And we're now looking to see where do we put these birds in the future, and how can we get them into a state where we're not having to worry too much about them. And that involves moving them, maybe translocating them to another island which doesn't have rats and doesn't have any other predatory species. And so this fantastic work that SOP Manu, our partners in French Polynesia on Tahiti, have been doing, and it's long-term, intensive, 20, 25, 30 years of work. And the other fascinating one is the Guam Rail, Koko, its return of this species. This went extinct in the wild by the middle of the 1980s as a result of brown tree snake on the island of Guam. Birds got taken into captivity, and over 20 to 30 years, we've managed to work out how to reintroduce them, how to get them breeding in captivity, and how to move on. And we've now got about 200 birds on the island of Rota to the north, and 60 to 80 birds on the Cocos Island, which is immediately to the south, Tony Island of Guam. And again, fantastic work by these folk who've been down there for decades working on this, Suzanne, Laura, Diane, and other folk in the zoos and stuff who've been helping to bring this species back to life. So that's pretty much what I want to do. I want to hand over straight away now to Jorn. I hope, Jorn, you're ready for this. This is my last slide. This is where I'll hand over to Jorn to work on talk about cargo, another fantastic iconic species, and see where that's going. Okay, so Jorn, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Can you just exit the share screen so I can join? Can you see the presentation? Okay. So I go along. Okay, thank you. I would like to present a conservation solution for the flightless endemic cargo of New Caledonia.
We can't see the presentation. Can you share screen, please?
Okay, I did. Okay. Well, I clicked multiple times on share screen. It's not starting. It's not starting.
Amanda, are you able to share Jorn's presentation? Do you have a copy of it?
I think it's better if I go, it's from my computer, because then I can go.
Apologies.
Here we go. It's working.
Okay, good. Yeah, no. Okay, let's go from the beginning. So it's about the conservation solution of the cargo of New Caledonia, a flightless endemic bird. And before starting, I would like to go a little bit back 20 years when we started our research. The state of knowledge at that time was that people thought that cargo would suffer from a range of invasive mammals introduced to New Caledonia. that there are species typical for ultramafic areas, which are heavy metal areas, covering about 1/3 of the surface of New Caledonia, rich in heavy metals and very poor in nutrients, with a lot of endemic species, and that cargo reproduce only once a year a single egg, so extremely low reproductive species. Coming to the invasive species, that's the reason why we worked on the invasive species of New Caledonia. Here, stray dogs, we have feral cats, we have ship rats or black rats, Pacific rats, feral pigs, and the introduced rooster deer. And all these species but dogs have wild populations. Dogs, they fortunately could not establish wild populations. They're only stray dogs, usually in the vicinity of settlements. And, oh, sorry, I have to go back. The only species that we actually could find impact on cargo was the dog, which has a significant impact by predation, while all the other species had either no impact or so low impact that was not detectable. So we come now to the second part, the ultramafic area. And if we look into the distribution of cargo, then we would expect a cargo that is specialized to ultramafic soil should be in the ultramafic area of New Caledonia. Here in red is mainly distributed in the south of New Caledonia. But when we did a population distribution modeling based on observations all over New Caledonia, we found that actually the center of distribution of cargo is the higher, the redder the area, the higher the probability for cargo distribution is actually in the center of New Caledonia on non-ultramafic soils. And the reason for this becomes clear if I present the results of our last 20 years of research we did in the Parc de la Rivière Bleue in the south of New Caledonia, here with in green, and in the center of New Caledonia, Parc des Grands Fougères, which is a reserve on non-ultramafic soil. If we compare mortality and reproduction in these two areas, in the ultramafic area in the south and the non-ultramafic area in the center of New Caledonia, the former assumption that cargo reproduce only once a year, one single egg, is only true for ultramafic areas, while on non-ultramafic areas, much richer, it's about 3 times higher reproduction. And this leads also to a much higher annual recruitment. Here, the number of chicks per adult is also about 3 times higher. And also the annual mortality is much higher in this area, which is mainly caused by dogs. 90% of the cargo killed are killed by dogs, while only about 1/3 in the ultramafic area is killed by dogs. So what we can see here, even with this high mortality rate, the reproductive output in the non-ultramafic area is much higher than in the ultramafic area, which explains why cargo are mainly distributed in the center of New Caledonia. But this also provides a possibility for management, because the 90% of cargo deaths caused by dogs can be more effectively managed in the non-ultramafic area, because if we can suppress this, we can get an extremely huge population growth and making the park a source population for New Caledonia. So when we go into the population dynamics in Parc des Grands Fougères, the non-ultramafic area in the center of New Caledonia, on the more richer soils, here I presented the mortality rate in the last 10 years. The dots with confidence intervals are the mortality rate, while the dark gray area is the recruitment and the light gray area is the population growth per year. What we had in 2017, extremely high predation impact. 60% of the population was killed and over 20% in the following year, leading to a crush down of the whole population. And in this year, we set up a cooperation between our research group, the park, and the local hunting association, and just could manage that most of the hunters shot dogs on site in the park, something most hunters didn't want to do before. And they did this, and this increased significantly the number of dogs killed here. Each year is here the number of dogs shown, and since 2017 this increased every year. And only by these small numbers of dogs killed done by hunters, they do it at the site, I mean, doing normal hunting, we could push down the mortality rate nearly to zero. And actually the small mortality rate in 2020 was caused by the coronavirus lockdown. Dogs found out very quickly, even in the first week of the lockdown, that no one could go anymore in the park, and totality of mortality in 2020 was caused in this first week of the lockdown. So with relatively little effort, in respect of money, we could have a very high impact by this management. So the conclusion I would like to present is that given the high reproductivity in this central area, the Parc des Grands Fougères is the key population for population growth in New Caledonia, because it has a high reproduction and it can be managed fairly easily, and then be a source population for the rest of New Caledonia. And we also found in a very short time out that control by hunting, only by hunters, can result in acceptable levels of dog predation, because we had, even in years when we had a predation rate of 5%, we had 4 times higher reproduction. So we always have a population growth in the area. And this cooperation works very well in the park, but could be extended to all areas of New Caledonia, actually, based on field work, I mean groundwork for many people in local areas. But this, in my opinion, is a good example how conservation, including participation of a broad population, can yield a good result. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Excellent stuff. That's really fascinating the way that's going. I'm going to rush straight on to Katerina to carry on with the New Caledonia situation. If we could get Katerina up and running. I'm thinking that you've still got your screen on, Ewan. Yeah? Brilliant.
It's okay.
That's fantastic. Katerina, could you take over? Thank you very much indeed.
So you can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so I'm a research scientist at the Australian Tropical Herbarium, and I'm also chairing the IUCN Orchid Specialist subgroup on the molecular identification of orchids. And I'm going to bring you to another kingdom now, when I speak about orchid conservation in New Caledonia. So because we are such a diverse audience, just a short introduction to orchids. So they are the second largest flowering plant group on the planet with over 24,000 species, which makes nearly 1 out of 10 flowering plant species an orchid. And while they are highly successful as a family, many orchid species are naturally rare. And that is mainly caused by their highly specific ecological interactions, which makes them very vulnerable to environmental and climate change. For example, they are often species-specific plant-pollinator interactions, and all orchids depend on a fungal partner for germination and then often later in life as well. The IUCN Red List lists 600 threatened orchid species globally, but this is still quite patchily assessed on that list because of regional differences in recording or also taxonomic biases. Here I would like to show the incredible work that the IUCN Red List Authority in New Caledonia has undertaken to list New Caledonian orchids. So in New Caledonia, we find 245 orchid taxa, of which about half are endemic to the country. And of the majority of orchids that were assessed, they found that 2% are critically endangered, 8% endangered, and 12 vulnerable. And as you can also see, there's quite a large proportion of data deficient orchid species still. And one difficulty is that the taxonomic understanding of orchids is in total difficult, but also in New Caledonia with many species that are still being discovered. And that is also the work of that group that is embedded within Endemia, an NGO in New Caledonia. So they have commenced or have established a large network of collaborators, also with taxonomists, who help with morphological assessments, but also with DNA studies. And just an example for a DNA-based study, which discovered that one of the New Caledonian endemic species was in fact a new genus, Aclidosa. It is only one species, and looking at the evolutionary relationships, we also found that it is quite an old lineage that is at the rank of a orchid subtribe, which is quite remarkable. Further DNA studies can help us understand the assembly of the New Caledonian orchid flora, and here's an example from the greenwood orchids, and here we see that the arrivals in New Caledonia date back to the Pliocene, and some are more recent here, Pleistocene, where we also find little genetic divergence between the closest species that are in Australia. So 3 years ago at the World Orchid Conference, the IUCN Orchid Specialist Subgroup on Molecular Identification of Orchids was established and has the aim to coordinate and also generate DNA data sets for the orchids of the world. There are several projects already going on, and one of them is the generation of framework data sets for New Caledonian orchids to clarify the taxonomy and evolutionary relationships and aid conservation. So the last topic is the orchid conservation and key biodiversity areas. So to date, orchids have not been used as trigger species for KBA assessments in the Pacific region. I looked at the New Caledonian species and found that there are suitable trigger species under criterion A1, the threatened species, and Asianthus bracteatus and Calocylus neocaledonicus are examples for those. while 80% of the threatened species in New Caledonia are found in protected areas. Quite a substantial percentage, 45% of the critically endangered and endangered species occur only in protected areas. So for the KBA assessments, the recommendation would be to start including orchids and do this for the protected areas first, so that governments can already evidence what their investment and is in protecting threatened species, but then also extend this to other areas as well. And with this, I would like to thank our partners and funders, and thank you for your attention.
Katerina, that's wonderful. That's fascinating stuff. That really kind of, I want to sort of pick this apart a hell of a lot more. But I've been so rubbish at this. I understand that we can finally play Emily's video. Do you want to go for that, Amanda? Fantastic stuff. Technology works at last.
Hi everyone from England. I'm Emily Beach and I work for an organisation called Botanic Gardens Conservation International, or BGCI. I'm going to talk today about tree conservation in the South Pacific, with particular focus on BGCI's work in both conservation prioritisation for trees and practical tree conservation. So before we can prioritise conservation action for trees, we need to know which species are in need of conservation action. Building on the work of the last 20 years, BGCI and IUCN SSC Global Tree Specialist Group decided to embark on the Global Tree Assessment with the goal of having a conservation assessment for every tree species by 2020. By identifying the tree species of most conservation concern, we will be able to provide both country and species level information for conservation prioritization, as well as highlight the most important threats to tree species and help to leverage funding and support for tree conservation. A large task, I think you would agree. And there are some pretty big questions to answer before starting the assessment work. How many tree species are there in the world? And have tree species already got conservation assessments? In order to answer these two questions, we created two databases, both publicly available online. Global Tree Search is a list of the world's tree species and their country distributions. We documented the world's 60,000 tree species, and it's regularly updated with new information. Threat Search is a list of conservation assessments for plant species and includes assessments on all levels, national, regional, and global, including IUCN assessments. Here you can see our current progress towards our goal, although we are currently receiving hundreds of assessments per week for tree species. We can already say, with 60% of trees with an assessment, that at least a quarter of all tree species worldwide are threatened with extinction. Now to look specifically at the South Pacific. The region is home to 5,692 tree species, 75% of which are only found in the region. Currently, more than 2,000 South Pacific trees are found on the IUCN Red List, and we have identified 1,044 tree species so far that are threatened with extinction. Last year, we held a regional workshop in Apia, Samoa, with experts from across the region to kickstart assessment progress for the South Pacific region. I would like to send particular thanks to the late Art Whistler for his dedication to the flora of the region and his enthusiasm for making our workshop happen. Work is ongoing to complete more assessments for the region. But BGCI's work is not only in tree assessments, but also in practical tree conservation. The Global Trees Campaign is a partnership between Fauna and Flora International and BGCI, and works to secure the future of the world's threatened tree species in situ for the benefit of people and wildlife. BGCI GTC projects mainly focus on ex situ conservation as well as propagation for recovery programs in the wild. GTC has two current projects in the South Pacific. The first is in Samoa, working on 4 species in collaboration with the Samoa Conservation Society, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, and Vailima Botanical Garden. Since 2019, a series of field surveys have been carried out in order to collect seed and vegetative parts of the target species for propagation trials at Vailima Botanical Garden. Whilst progress is being made for 3 species and ex situ collections are growing, Vivea samoensis has not been relocated in the wild and was last seen on Mount Pui in 2008. We also have a project in Fiji working on 2 species, including the sago palm, which you will hear more about from Jake shortly. As well as ex situ and recovery actions, we are also interested in situ conservation. Of the 198 seed plants used as trigger species for KBAs across the region, 163 of these are trees. And the results of the global tree assessment will feed directly into the KBA selection process, beginning next year, when we shall start working with the KBA Secretariat. The results of the global tree assessment will be made available early next year and will include a portal to access all the information gathered on tree species on a global, country and species level. It will also include a formal report, and the information will be available to anyone looking to use it for conservation purposes. If you have any information about tree species in the region, please do get in contact. We're always looking for new assessments. But that's all I have time for. Thank you for your attention, and please do get in touch with us if you have any information about trees or would like any more information about anything I mentioned. Thank you. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank goodness for that. Well done, Emily. That's excellent. We've run out of time. Sorry, Jake. We'll all have to go down to the lounge to listen to Jake. I'm going to have to go and get a very large double, I think, because I feel like I need at least that, and the sweat that's coming out of me is horrendous. So I'll join you all in the lounge, and everybody who's been a speaker, I'll buy the first round, and everybody else who wants to got questions, sorry, we've run out of time. But come down, have a meeting in the lounge. Let's go and do it like we do in another conference, and just go and have a chat with each other, 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 1-to-4. Okay, thanks ever so much, everybody. Yes, and it's really good. And I just wish I could work technology these days. All the best. Bye.